And we're back. You are listening to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. And you're watching us on the Fight Now television channel. And if you don't have Fight Now on your sports channel lineup, you got to call your local television provider. I don't care if it's satellite or cable. Tell them you want Fight Now right now. Don't forget, every night is Fight Night on Fight Now, 10 p.m. Eastern. Check out their website for all the information about what's on tonight and also anything you need to know about the channel, www.fightnow.com. Speaking of now, joining me in my favorite segment is my main man, Tony Triem, ready to do the heavyweight spotlight. What's up, Tony?
Not a whole lot, man. How you doing today, Bill?
Oh, not too bad. Finally, we got a little break from the heat wave here in upstate New York, so I'm happy about that. I can actually breathe, you know?
Well, it's only 89 degrees here this morning, and it's going to be 114, so it ain't going to be too bad here in beautiful downtown Vegas today.
Well, hopefully I'll get a chance to witness some of that weather in the near future, but we'll save that for another day. But today we're going to be putting a heavyweight spotlight on a great subject you decided to pick today, and I'm psyched. I'm ready to learn a lot because it's not exactly my strongest point. And today, Tony's going to talk about the American heavyweight champions. Now, don't be confused with American world heavyweight champions. We're talking about before that, during an era when the Americans had heavyweight champions. And, Tony, I'll let you start off with the guy. Well, you know, there's some discrepancy here. So I'm going to let you tell me who the first American heavyweight champion was.
Okay, but before I go there, Billy, let's talk about this era for a minute. It's a strange era in time for our sport of boxing. And it started in 1810 and it lasted to 1889, so about a 79-year period. It's a short period of time. But it was a hard time for the historians because there was a lot of confusing things went on. Two major problems was you didn't have to win the title. If you challenged a champion and he refused you, well, then the challenger that would claim the title if the champion refused to fight him. So, you didn't actually have to lose the championship in the ring like you do today. It's a strange time.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question about that. Were there actually multiple champions during that time? If I challenge you and you don't accept it, and I'm self-proclaimed the champion, but if there was another guy in another part of the country, and we all know that the communication lines weren't as fast as they were today, maybe he challenged you too, and would he be claiming himself as a champ? I mean, how did they?
Very possibly could be doing that, Billy, in that time era. It's really a strange era for the sport of boxing, and it's hard to follow. And thank God we only lasted 79 years because. There was no governing bodies, there was no rules, there was no laws, and who was going to enforce them if there was a law anyway? Who could enforce them?
Sounds like my kind of time.
And that's why a lot of people say that it reminds them of the UFC and MMA today, the way they fought back then, because anything went. I mean, you could wrestle, you could kick, you could bite, you could use cleats, and the main reason for using the cleats was because the ring was on the ground. They put up 4 posts, and it would be a grassy field or it'd be a dirt field, and that would be the mat for your ring. And referee would scratch a line from the toe to scratch, and the battle was on. And a round back then lasted until you were pinned, you were knocked down. It was strange fighting back then. You only had 30 seconds
in between
rounds.
Right.
Your corner could come in, get you, pull you back to the corner, revive you, and you had 30 seconds to toe the scratch.
Yep,
you couldn't toe the scratch, you lost the fight.
Exactly.
A strange era.
And the only two the rules back then in the bare knuckle days where you couldn't do two things. You couldn't gouge out your opponent's eyes, and you couldn't hit a man while he was down. And that was it. And Tony's 100% correct. A round lasted from the time they came to scratch until one of the fighters went down, which is interesting because sometimes a round could have lasted, a few seconds, and sometimes 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And one of the tricks they used to use, might as well tell the listeners this too, Tony. One of the tricks the guys used to use, the corners would get them to stand up and get the round to continue, and then they would fall back down to give them another 30 seconds rest.
Absolutely.
And that was the way they used to bide themselves some time. So,
that was a rough era, Billy. And these guys didn't fight a lot. They didn't have a lot of fights on their record, and the reason for that is they were so brutally beat up. Bones were broken. They were immediately after fights, they'd go to the hospital and stay in hospital for days and weeks and months for broken bones and their cheekbones were broken. It was a brutal time in the sport of boxing, and
that was the winner.
It's a hard area to follow. It really is.
And that was the winner.
It could have been.
Yeah.
It was a tough area, and it lasted from 1810 to 1879. Like I said, approximately 79 years. And then in 1892, the Queensberry Rule came into effect, and that's how we know boxing today. But we're going to talk about 13 great men that fought before the Queensberry era, and they held claim to the heavyweight championship of America. And it is, it's the sources back then are weird, like I mentioned earlier, and so it wasn't documented properly. The newspaper men were not the most literate men in the world, and they didn't spell names right. They didn't accurately write down the winners or the losers, and so it's kind of a touch and go situation, on accuracy. But in history, they say, and I say, Tom Molyneux was the Virginia slave, the man you wrote your book about, and you probably forgot more about him than I know because of all the research you've done recently, was the first American heavyweight champion. Although other sources say that Tom Hyer was. So, Billy, I think you got Tom Molyneux as the Virginian slave, as he was known, because he won his freedom by boxing. And he went to England and fought a lot, but he earned the American heavyweight title, in my opinion, from what I can gather and read and research on. What do you say about Tom Molyneux or Tom Molyneux, as some people call him? I call him Tom Molyneux. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name properly or not. But you did the research on him. You did the book that you got coming out. What do you say about Tom?
Well, Tom Molyneux, in my opinion, was clearly the first American heavyweight champion. He fought for his freedom and, got out of Dodge, so to speak. He fought for freedom. He was born a slave, and not getting into the whole story. He fought for his freedom and was granted his freedom. As a matter of fact, he won. Mm-hmm. It was plantation versus plantation. The United States has a good way of hiding the fact that slave fighting was very popular back in those days. And basically what a plantation would do for entertainment is put their best slaves up against another plantation's slaves, and they would fight, and they would gamble and, have a good old time. Right. And Tom Molyneux fought for his freedom and then traveled. The best that, we found was he ended up in New York and started fighting professionally as being paid for it. And he was regarded as the very first American champion. And with that title, and this is why I'm so adamant about him getting the credit for being the first one versus Tom Hyer. Now, Tom Hyer, as you mentioned, a lot of sources name him as the first champion, but he didn't even fight that particular fight until 1841. You're talking 31 years after Tom Molyneux fought for the world title. Now, the reason why I say he's clearly the first American champion is because all the other sources cite Tom Cribb as being the first fighter to fight for a world title. Now, at the time, Tom Cribb was the English champion, heavyweight champion. Excuse me. And when he fought Tom Molyneux in 1810, Tom Molyneux obviously brought the American title with him. Otherwise, would have classified that fight as just being for the English championship, and every source cites it as being for a world title. So therefore, I think that's proof in the pudding that Tom Molineaux indeed was our first American champion. Unfortunately, they don't credit him. None of the major Hall of Fames, boxing Hall of Fames, credit Tom Molineaux as being that. They do give that distinction to Tom Heyer. One thing I want to add real quick before you tell us about Tom Heyer and whoever else you have maybe before Tom, is that boxing, bare-knuckle boxing, really didn't become popular in the United States until the Civil War. And a lot of reasons for that, the popularity, why it gained more popularity, was a fitness craze that the United States was actually going through at the time. And it's amazing because there could have very well have been other American champions that we don't know about.
And, and these guys are rarely talked about today, if ever, that we're going to talk about. And it's a part of boxing history, I think, that should be remembered, and it's important to the history of our sport, and that's why I kind of would like to just touch on it a little bit today. There's no way we're going to be able to talk about them all in our segment today, but maybe another time we can pick it up. Not the next time, but maybe another time if the fans are interested, we can pick it up at another time. But okay, Tom Molineaux, depends on who is pronouncing the name. I agree with you that him being the first American heavyweight champion, as you noted, he was known as a Virginian slave. But a lot of historians do not credit Tom for that championship. They go with Tom Heyer, and Tom was a strong man and tough and skillful fighter. He's best known for having one of the longest fights in history, which lasted 101 rounds, against a guy by the name of John McLeister. The fight took place in your backyard, Billy, up there in New York. You ought to know where this is out. Is Cloudswell Landing. You know where that's at?
I absolutely do. It was the reason why they decided to have that fight there was because I believe it was located in a part where 3 states all met in a corner, and they weren't able to get busted by the cops, if I recall correctly.
That's right, because the cops intervened so many of these fights. And another thing that happened during these times, not in this fight, of course, I'm not talking about this fight, but another thing, if the favorite fighter was getting beat, the fans would go and cut the ropes and go in and save the fight. They'd stop the fight, but the fans would just tear the ring down to save their fighter. I mean, it was a crazy time back then. But the fight we were talking about took place on September the 9th of 1841 at Cloudswell Landing, which you know about. It lasted 2 hours and 55 minutes, and Tom Heyer wins the fight. Back in McLeister, however you say these names, I butcher names worse than you. In his corner was a man by the name of Yankee Sullivan, who some people claim was a heavyweight champion of America. I don't, because I can't find anything in the records that actually say that he was a heavyweight champion of America. But let's do it this way so that we can get a better understanding. The 13 men we're talking about is Tom Molineaux was the first one, Tom Heyer the second one, John Morrissey, John Campbell-Heaney, the Benicia boy, Joe Coburn, Jim Elliott, John J. Dwyer. John J. Dwyer was of a New York fighter, and he also worked in the courts in New York when he quit fighting. Mike McCoo, Tom Allen, Jim Mace, Joe Goss, Patty Ryan, and of course everybody knows of John L. Sullivan. The 2 most popular ones were probably of all of them is Patty Ryan and John L. Sullivan.
Yeah, but were they American?
Yes.
Jim Mace was English.
Jim Mace also claimed Jim Mace won the English title, got in trouble with the law, and came to America and claimed the heavyweight championship of America.
And I also thought that Patty Ryan, I could have sworn he was born in Ireland.
He was.
Oh, he just came over here and won the title.
Yes,
he was
born in Ireland. He was.
You mentioned Jim Elliott. He's one of my favorite guys, a mutual friend that we both know, Hank Kaplan, who passed away. We lost a great historian there. One day I asked him, that's my favorite Hank Kaplan story. One day I asked him about Jim Elliott, and he says, "Here, write your name and address down on this piece of paper," and I did. And he says, "Let me look through my files," and you know how he kept all his stuff. And about a month later, sure enough, I get a package in the mail that he Xerox copied all the stuff on Jim Elliott. What a character that guy was. He talk about
you talk about a badass.
Oh, talk about claiming a belt. He goes into jail. I think he did some time in Jersey, if I'm not mistaken, and comes out of jail and says, "Hubba hubba, I'm the new champ." Anybody got anything to say about it? And that's the end of that, you know.
And wasn't he shot?
Yes, he was. He was
shot.
I think
he was shot and killed. And he did a lot of bank robberies, assault and battery. Went to jail for all kinds of weird stuff. He was a bad dude.
Yeah, yes, he was. You know, and you mentioned John Morrissey, and I'm glad. Maybe we are better off jumping around. John Morrissey also has a connection to where we are right here. Old Smoke, yeah, he was the American heavyweight champion in 1858. He beat the Benicia boy, John Heenan, which was kind of a weird fight. It was an 11-round fight. But this guy turned around. He left. He was the one that was, I believe, between him and Yankee Sullivan. They used to be what they called ballot pushers. They used to force people to vote when our political. Remember, our country was a baby. You know, we're talking about a fairly new country here, less than 100 years old, and this guy turned out to be a guy who started Saratoga Racetrack. He had a gambling facility there, a casino. And then after that, he became a congressman for the rest of his time in the limelight. So, what a crazy chain of events for John Morrissey.
Yeah. And his nickname was Old Smoke.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a crazy guy. I mean, he was but in his fight with Morrissey's fight with John Campbell-Heenan, their first fight. They say that if Heenan didn't, I don't know if his hand was broken. He injured his hand or something in the fight. You know, I'm not sure if it was broken or what really happened, but his hand was injured. But they say that if the Camel hadn't, or the Benicia boy as he was known, hadn't injured that hand, that he would have beat Morrissey. So when they fought the second time, of course, Heenan. Morrissey refused, so Heenan claimed the title. That's what I was getting at earlier, The champion don't want to fight you, so, okay, I'm going to take the title. So that's how Heenan became the champion, because the second fight, Morrissey wouldn't fight.
Well, let me jump. Because of that, I believe, now, you're going to have to remind me who we fought, but as a matter of fact, the second most popular worldwide recognized fight. The first one, of course, was my guy, Tom Molyneux, against Tom Cribb in 1810. But then the second fight, which they called the greatest prize fight, was John C. Heenan, and it was a world.
Tom Sayer.
And Tom Sayer. Okay, that's right. And Tom Sayer. And these guys fought to a draw, I believe. And this was one of the craziest stories that I loved reading about and learning about. They had over 15,000 people in attendance to watch this show. And oh, by the way, they didn't have a date or a location on the tickets, and they actually conned a train to take all these patrons that showed up at the right time in the right place without any time or date on the ticket, and drive them out and pick out a good area off the train where they set up the ring and had the fight, so that they knew that the cops wouldn't be able to get there, because the fastest way they would be on horseback. I love that. Talk about promotion. We say that Top Rank and Bob Arum and Golden Boy and Don King are great promoters, but geez, 15,000 people with no date or time or place on a ticket. Now that's promoting.
And it was actually a 42-round fight. 37 of the rounds, the referee was in the ring. After the 37th round with the Sayer Heenan fight, the referee left around. The fight went 7 more rounds without a referee, and this is another great example of the crowd and cutting down the ring because Sarah was getting beat. Also, a story about that is kind of odd about that fight. They called that fight a draw because nobody actually became a winner. They didn't declare a winner, and both were given a belt. But Heening's belt was never paid for. He had to return it because he repossessed it.
I never knew that.
In that fight, so a lot of weird things went on in this era, man. It's a great era, and I kind of, I'm kind of just trying to renew this era because it's a great era, and it's a time of our history that needs to be remembered, and nobody talks about these guys.
No,
nobody.
Hey, let me ask you this. Is Heenan a guy that had some kind of famous actress who was kind of like a prostitute or something? And
his wife.
Right, his wife. And he, that was a weird relationship, too. I mean, he didn't even live with her or anything, and I think she was making money off of him. And I don't know if he ever fought again after that great fight, did he?
I'm not sure if he did or not, Billy, to be honest with you. If he fought after that fight with Sarah. I mean, that was a brutal match. Both of them were beat half to death,
Oh, I know.
In that fight, I'm not really sure on that, man.
Yeah, I remember reading accounts of literally them just throwing them like a slab of beef on the back of a wagon, both of them, and as they nursed themselves back to health over a week for each one. Hey, tell us about Joe Goss, because he was an American champ for American bare knuckle champ for quite a while, actually, for 4 years, from 1876 through 1880. The interesting thing about him is, I know that he beat Tom Allen, but you mentioned Jem Mace. Now, he actually fought Jem Mace a couple of times for the English heavyweight title. One fight lasted a very long time, one round as a draw. The other one was 21 rounds. But then after that, he fought for the American title. Tell us about this guy. Was he in the same class as these other fighters that we're talking about? Was he a talented fighter or just a badass?
Well, he was more of an intelligent, crafty battler, Billy. He was quick and agile, and
he was
his
small,
footwork
right?
was very good, and he hit with two really fast hands,
Yeah, because he was small. He was only 150 pounds, right?
Yeah, he was a little guy, but he was a crafty little battler, He challenged in 1862. He challenged Henning for the American title and Henning refused to fight him. Again, this is where the challenger's claiming the title because the champion wouldn't give him a fight, So that's how Coburn got the title.
Now, I'm talking
Coburn
about
was challenged by a guy by the name of Jim Elliott, and Elliott claimed the title.
Okay, now what year was that?
1865.
Oh, okay, so that's before this guy. We were talking about Joe Goss. He won the title in 1876 against Tom Allen. So Elliott was before him. Man, it was follow the bouncing titles, huh? We thought we had it. We thought we couldn't keep track of it today.
If you claim the title, you was the champ, I guess, back then. I guess is the best way to put it. I'm in San Francisco, you're in New York, and I say, okay, Billy C., you claim to have the American Heavyweight Championship. I'm in San Francisco. I'm challenging your butt. You don't get back to me, so I'm claiming your title.
Well,
what are you going to do about it?
You're gonna have to fight me. That's it, right? I mean, that's how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
And something in perspective. When you put the purses, like we touched on the Yankee Sullivan and Tom Heyer fight that went down in 1849 or 48 or something like that. These guys,
$10,000 a side.
That's what I mean. $10,000 in 1850 is a hell of a lot of money. I mean, you're talking about multi-million-dollar purse. So it's in perspective to the big money fights of today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was phenomenal amount of money. I don't even know how they raised that kind of money because there was no cars, there was no electricity, there's no running water in your homes. I mean, it was a really primitive area of our history, and it's a great part of our history. And I hate to see this kind of stuff get lost because it's not talked about. It's just a great time of boxing, in my opinion.
Well, let's touch. We only got 2 minutes left here, so let's touch on John L. Sullivan, because obviously he was after my boy Tom Molinon. He actually became the next biggest American sports star, and he made the transition. He went from bare knuckle American champ to the first world champion. So tell us about that, and what made him decide to leave the bare knuckle days behind him.
Well, I don't think it was a matter of him being able to decide that. In 1892, I think it was, the Queensberry rule took effect. What was he? The Yorker Queensberry, or whatever he was. I don't know what he was. Anyway, he really liked boxing, and he lent his name to set up a rule, which is known as the Queensberry rule, which still governs boxing today. From 1892 to today, the Queensberry rule still rules. But boxing was becoming very popular, and a lot of people say that John L. Sullivan was the heavyweight champion of the world before he fought Corbett in 1892, the first gloved championship fight in history under the Queensberry rule, and James J. Corbett becoming the first heavyweight champ of the world under the Queensberry rule. But a lot of people say, and it's arguably, I don't know whether I rate John L. as a world heavyweight champion before he fought Corbett or not. I really don't know how to go there with that, because they say a lot of people say his fight with Jake Carrane, that 42-round battle that they had, was for the heavyweight championship of the world, and I'm not sure that that's correct, but who am I to say it's not correct either? As I said, it's arguable. It's an arguable statement whether he was the heavyweight champion of the world or not. But Sullivan was the first immortal great champion of our country, and like you said, he was the link between the bare knuckle and the glove era. He was the first sports idol of our country. He was powerful, and he was quick. He could hit with either hand, but exceptionally strong in his right hand. And they say that he could break your jaw with one punch.
Well, he could definitely break a couple of beer bottles too. He was quite the drinker. And you know what, Tony? Our time is up, but I think this is a perfect time to stop, because I think that next time we should pick up and get deep into John L. What do you think, man? I mean, he deserves it, and we can analyze that exact question, and maybe between now and then come up with an opinion. Should we consider him a world champion from both eras, or is he an American champion from bare knuckle and a world title challenger for the gloved era? I mean, that's a good debate.
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
That would be a good subject, and yeah, let's do that.
All right.
I'll do a little homework on John L., and we'll see if we can come up with a decision on, and maybe the chat room can get involved and help us out with it.
I'll tell you what we may have to do is change this segment to its own 1 hour show, because we certainly don't have enough time, especially if we start arguing.
We don't. I mean, we just get started and we're done. Well, but maybe today it's a good thing, because there's so many controversial writings on this era, this short period of time in boxing. So, who's to say we're correct in what we're saying? I think I was pretty accurate in describing this era. I think that I was correct in what I said, but you can go back in history, Billy, and look at 15 books, and you're going to get 15 different answers. And I came to my conclusions, and this is what I reported to you today and to our listeners. So that's my opinion on how it went down.
Well, you know what? Boxing's subjective. It always has been and always will be. So, Tony, we'll pick this up with John L. Sullivan next time. And as usual, great job, man.
Thanks, my friend.
All right, take care. That's Tony Triem, Heavyweight Spotlight. I got to take a break. We'll be right back.